So fun being here. Yeah, there's in the Bible, there's a list of supernatural gifts, and hospitality is in there. Supernatural. And I think both places we've been last week with the Medinas and here, definitely guys have just that gift of hospitality. Makes people feel at ease and at home, and just a side note, like you can tell when you walk into a home if there's like tension, even be in the marriage or even like just in the home, you can kind of feel it, so it's just nice. You guys have done a good job working hard to maintain peace here. So good job. We're so happy to be with you today and hang out. You guys can come. Anyone want to sit by me? Man, come on.
I'll be back. I'm gonna put the computer on for the kids. Be right back.
Okay. All right. So these small group gatherings. There's a kind of talk about we can meet outside back at church or whatever, and we probably will do that eventually. We can have an outdoor service even back in the sanctuary. I don't mind about that. It's just I feel like God's doing something with the small groups. He's doing something very purposeful. And I think he wants to see relationships begin to bond, and these gatherings. Because this is like coming here, I feel like Paul, where he says, I'm going to the church of Ephesus. I'm coming to the church of PV. This is the church of PV. And so I come and get to strengthen you guys and be with you guys, and it's really, really fun. So God's definitely doing something with the small groups. It's his directive, and so when we get to the word of the Lord, that's what we do. We don't always know exactly what he's doing, but I want to get into the message. We get back into our favorite person, Moses, but it was fun on Thursday. Took a little bonding trip with Eric, Rick, and Dan, and we went to Echo Park, and I was looking for this guy that we had met before. His name was Zach, and I just thought maybe we could start something there because there's a whole host of homeless in Echo Park. Like, it's just tent city, And I thought maybe we could do a service there with the homeless or whatever. So I met this guy, Zach, and he's a Christian. So we went to go find him. We found him, but he introduced me to someone named Austin. And I just want to share this story with you because it's just so cool. So Austin leads a Bible study right there in Echo Park with the homeless, 10 a.m. on Fridays. And then he also leads worship. Thank you.
I know. I'm going.
So he also leads worship Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 7 o'clock at night in this little canopy. So he's there, and we start talking to him, a young guy, maybe 22, 25, something like that. And we start talking to him. He says, oh yeah, I was at IHOP Kansas City for a while. God called me to LA. And I was in a hotel for about a week. And God told me, if you really want to love on the poor, live with them. And I was just like blown away by this guy's testimony. So he buys a tent and he's living in the park with the homeless, and he's having Bible studies and worship. I was just like, wow, this guy's legit. So we go to his tent. He's like, come see my tent. So we go to his tent. He has a little canopy outside of his tent. He calls it the Tabernacle David. And so we just worshiped and prayed with him over Echo Park in LA. It was such a sweet time. There's a little church right there. The Church of Echo Park. This stuff's just happening all over. And we were just so stoked to have someone there that we can partner with and maybe get something going at Echo Park. And he was a little bit kind of suspicious at first, which is good. He's kind of checking things out, and he's like, well, you want to do ministry here? And our response was, we want to find someone here, like the person of peace that we can support. We're not coming to do our own thing. I mean, I was telling him, you have authority here, so we want to help you, right? And that's just like Jesus, to support one another in what he's doing. So that's kind of neat. It was neat to see kind of an example of what I talked about last week, which was, yeah, we're here to change the world, but we're not of the world. And here's this guy, you could say, well, what about his future? Where is he going in life? And but he's all in, like he's all into the eternal things, and he's changing other people's lives, which is so cool, right? And so he didn't let that stop him. So that was a really neat story. So last week I talked about at the very end of the message, our promised land. I talked about our promised land being, we have certain truths that we anchor our soul to. And I talked about when Jesus came on the earth, he preached, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And that word at hand is used in different places in the Bible. It basically means here, right? The kingdom of heaven is here. And so that was something that was revolutionary because they always figured God was far off. And he's saying, no, the kingdom of heaven is here. God is near, right? Also, Colossians 1, Paul says, the great mystery that has been being revealed in our time is Christ in you. And so that's another promise we hold on to. Like, wow, Christ is in me. I don't have to go to a building. I don't have to go seek it out at a conference. Like Christ in me, he goes where I go. And it's not like, God has shrunk himself to fit in you. This should blow your mind, right? He didn't shrink himself to fit in you. He's not Joe size. No, that's the whole mystery of Christ in me means so much more. Like it just expands my whole world. You know what I mean? Because he is not limited to time and space. But this is our promised land. Another one is John 17:3. Basically says eternal life is knowing Jesus. And that's kind of interesting compared to what I grew up. I got saved when I was 19. Growing up, you always thought, heaven is out there. Heaven is after I die. Eternity is I'll get it someday. But it says, that eternity is knowing Jesus. So eternity has already started once we met Jesus, and it's not limited to after we die. This is just amazing. And these are anchors that we anchor our soul to. Like we are not of this world. We're citizens of another realm, right? Yeah. Another one is Philippians 1:21, one of my favorites. It's on my wall in my office, and it's to live as Christ and to die as gain. And so while we're here on earth, we have an assignment, and after this life, wow, it's just more, glory to glory. So these are certain truths that I consider my promised land. It's the spiritual Zion, what we anchor our soul to. However, on earth, we have an assignment. We've been given charge over certain things. And so we can't forget that, right? And so we have been given much, right? And what's that famous line from Spider-Man's stepdad? Much given, I forgot.
Carter probably knows it.
Something you get, more responsibility for those much required something. We could look it up later. Yeah.
With great power comes great responsibility.
With great power comes great responsibility. That's good. Yes.
If that's not it, that's still good.
Quoting Marvel. We just quoted Marvel. That's not the Bible. That's Marvel. So we've been given much, but what we do have is a huge principle in the Bible called stewardship, right? And I'll get into the parable of the talents, Matthew 24. It talks about stewardship. But I want to just point out Isaiah 9:7. Isaiah 9 is like the Christmas verse, when they're talking about, for us a child has been born, child has been given, the virgin and all that stuff. Yeah. But 9:7 says, his government, the increase of his government, talking about Jesus, the increase of his government will have no end. No end to the increase. We're talking about the increase of his government. So this increase that has been started will now have no end. It'll continue to move forward with no end in sight and no retreat, no possibility of any retreat, no going back 2 steps and forward 1. Like the kingdom of our King Jesus, the increase is continuing on, and it's going to increase. But the crazy thing is He chooses to use us, right? So the increase works out through us. We are His agents. We are His cabinet. We are His ambassadors. His government on the earth is being poured out through us. And so we have a great responsibility of being stewards of what He's given us, right? But I want to, just with that word of Isaiah 9:7, when we talk about stewardship, sometimes we talk about, well, I want to be faithful so I don't get in trouble. But when the Bible talks about stewardship, I want to keep in mind that verse Isaiah 9:7, because when we think about stewardship, we should automatically think about increase. We steward for increase. Yep. We don't steward to maintain. And God's been speaking to me about this. You know, I'm a pretty good maintainer. If I get something, I can maintain it. But that's not what increase is. Increase is when you take something and you go to another level with it. Mm-hmm. You expand it. Yeah. You cause it to grow, right? And so being a steward means being a steward of increase. But there are a few things that need to be in place when we think about increase. When we turn back to Moses, and Moses gets the call from God from the burning bush, he asks two basic questions. It's a roundabout, but if you look in there in Exodus, he has two main questions. The first one is, who am I? When God calls him, he's like, well, who am I? You know, it's just all of his insecurities, failures, all of his doubts just come up. Who am I? But the second thing he says is, okay, if you send me there, who should I tell them you are? And so the second question is, well, who are you? Because his mom taught him throughout, that who God was. But now he's asking again, this is a big call. Okay, who are you now? How can I trust you? And he says, and all the way up until this point, God had a name in the Hebrew, Elohim. And now it's switched. God gives a name that's his eternal name that the Jews have respected all the way since then, is Yahweh, I am. And so they respect this name so much that every time a scribe writes the Bible out, writes the Old Testament out, every time they write that name Lord, they actually have to throw away that pen. They don't use it ever again, and they start with a new pen. Their reverence for that name is so great, they don't even pronounce it. They don't use it. And so that's why in our Old Testament, it says when you see Lord in all caps, big L and lower small caps, Lord, that's the name Yahweh. But they don't pronounce that. They won't pronounce that because of the reverence. And so his two main questions, that's kind of a side note, but his two main questions are, who am I and who are you? Right? Those are two main questions that we need to answer when we're talking about being a steward, because being a steward is actually being faithful with the things that God has called us to, right? So it's similar to what Moses was facing. God was calling him to something, and he's like, who are you and who am I? We have to answer those questions, right? And so I'm going to give you a few things. There are a couple beliefs that need to be put in place to be a good steward and to to have a mindset of increase. One, realizing that all you have belongs to Him. I know in your mind, we all would agree. But in your heart, sometimes that's where the attachment is, right? All that we have belongs to Him. Even our family, even our kids, our possessions, obviously, it belongs to Him. My kids are on loan. I'm supposed to, develop them and give them back to the Lord, right? Number two, realizing that all you have has the potential to glorify Him. Even the smallest things, like, God told Moses, what's in your hand? Well, I have a staff, and he used that staff. That very thing that he used for his occupation was something that God used in the future. So everything that you have has the potential to glorify Him. Number 3, accepting the responsibility of stewardship. Sometimes there's a breakdown or a barrier where we just don't want to take responsibility. And that's something that is kind of normal especially when you grow up in a home that you get in trouble a lot, or you've gotten in trouble for doing things wrong. You were never celebrated for taking risks. You were always, put down for failure. So that's a little bit hard sometimes. So we have to get past that and say, you know what, God is a good God, and I'm going to take responsibility for what I've been given, from the smallest thing to the biggest thing, right? Number 4, being detached from the world enough so that you can take risks. So it's hard to take risks when you think what you have is all you have and you need to protect it. And you may lose even that. Like, that's really hard to take risks, right? Yeah. But when you're detached from the world and the way the world thinks, then you know that finances, that relationships and everything come from a source, come from God. Woo-hoo. And so He owns a cattle on 1,000 hills, and He even owns the hills. And so we have to look at that and say, oh, you know what? There's an unlimited resource available to me because I'm a child of God, right? That's detaching from the world system and thinking on with heaven's system, going, God owns it all. Okay? Number 5, believing in a good God who rewards. That is key. Believing in a good God who rewards. So just like Moses said, who are you? To know who God really is to know that He is so good, His plans for us are good, and that He rewards those who take risks. He actually applauds those who take risks. Mm-hmm. He applauds obedience and not necessarily success. That's an interesting concept to think about, but He applauds obedience, not necessarily success, right? He doesn't go after perfection, He goes after excellence. Okay? So the God who rewards. Okay? Number 6, believing in a loving God so that fear is not determining your steps. Fear cannot determine our steps, because when fear determines our steps, we won't risk. It's hard to think of increase. It's only we only think of protection. Protect what I have, right? And last but not least, expect increase because of whose you are, not who you are. When we approach this thing of stewardship and increase, we could think, well, like Moses did, well, who am I? That's not the right question. Whose am I? That's the right question. Yeah. Okay, and because of that, we can expect increase. Okay? A lot of things that have to do with increase are, prioritizing our time. I got into this little game on my phone because of the kids. The kids got into it, and I like to do things with them, so I got into this game. Well, it turned into, instead of playing with them, then I started playing, on all my free time. And then my free time got bigger because my priorities got smaller, right? Because the game took over. I wanted to catch up to them. I wanted to compete with them. And so I started, and I'm like, oh, this is not good. And I started asking the Lord about it, because things are suffering, I'm stuck in this game. And
kids aren't fed.
Yeah, so, and then, and God said, play with them. And so, okay, that's a good, that was just personally for me, that was a really good line in the sand. Okay, play with them. So on my own, don't play. Because that's where it's like I'm getting sucked in, So I'm play with them, because that's what I first started out to do, was just connect with them on that level. But it started taking over, started becoming a priority. So I want to read, we can read together if we turn to Matthew 25.
Wait, what?
Matthew 25.
Matthew 25. And this context is really Jesus talking about the end times. I mean, Jesus is, chapter 24, is he's talking about when the Son of Man returns, when Christ returns. And then at the end, and then the beginning of 25 is the parable of the 10 virgins, which is like, be ready. And so then he goes into this parable of the talents. And starting at verse 14, I'm gonna go through it pretty quickly here. I'm going to try to read the whole thing. It says, for it is just like, and he's talking about the kingdom. He's talking about when it comes. And so be ready. And he's referring to that. He says, just like a man about to go on a journey who called his own slaves and entrusted his possessions to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, each according to his own ability. And he went on his journey. That's really interesting. Each according to his own ability. So he evaluated his servants and he gave them according to their ability. He's very smart master. Okay? And so when you think about, well, I don't have what so-and-so has. I don't have the platform. I don't have the gifting. I don't have maybe the favor of someone, or even in your job, or even in the church. How come I don't have that? I'm just as good. Well, you might want to think, God is in charge and he gives people things according to their ability. And so you don't know people's secret place. You don't know what they've worked for God to promote them. You have no clue. And so go back and go, you know what? I need to fight for this in my secret place and leave the promotion up to God, because he's a really good administrator. And then he went on his journey. So immediately the one who had received the 5 talents went and traded with them and gained 5 more talents. Increase. It's awesome. In the same manner, the one who had received the 2 talents gained 2 more. But he who received the 1 talent went away and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. Okay, that's the fear-based mentality. That's the orphan mentality. You can put all kinds of labels to it, but he was afraid to lose it. Okay? So God wants us to have a mentality of increase, not afraid to lose it. And in order to do that, you just can't have fear lead you. Believing in a good God and receiving his love combats that, right? Okay, so now after a long time, and this is talking about, telling this parable, remember, because when Jesus comes back, it's going to be like this. And I know that Jesus is going to come back, at least for me, in 90 years. Like, I know I'll meet him in 90 years. So whether he comes back before that or not, I'll know I'm going to face this, question of stewardship, at least when I die, right? So it's coming. So he says, after a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. The one who had received the 5 talents came up and brought 5 more talents, saying, Master, you entrusted 5 talents to me. See, I have gained 5 more talents. His master said to him, well done, good and faithful slave. It sounds funny when you add slave in there, but NASBM. But now we're called friends, so thank God for that. You were faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. So there is a reward for him for the increase of his stewardship. Also the one who had received the 2 talents came up and said, Master, you entrusted 2 talents to me. See, I have gained 2 more talents. His master said to him, well done, good and faithful slave. You were faithful with a few things, and I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. You sense he's very proud there. This particular master is a rewarder. And this parable is talking about how the kingdom works, right? He's a rewarder. And that makes sense. They did something with it. They made money for him, and he rewarded them. The next one, the third one, is a little bit shocking. And it says in verse 24, and the one who also had received the 1 talent came up and said, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. So this reveals his theology, really, reveals his view of the master. He doesn't really feel like a child at this point. He feels like he's, this is unfair, the way the master's treating them. And so he says, I was afraid. So this type of mentality leads to fear. I was afraid, and went away and hid your talent in the ground. See, you have what is yours. It just feels like a jab right there. You have what is yours, But his master answered and said to him, you wicked, lazy slave, you knew that I reap where I did not sow and gather where I scatter no seed. Then you ought to have put the money in the bank, and on my arrival I would have received the money back with interest. And he says, therefore take him away, to even take away what he has, and everyone who has, more shall be given, and have in abundance. But from the one who does not have, even what he does not have will be taken away. And so he says some pretty harsh things after that. And then Jesus is teaching more, he's going into the judgment. And so this reveals something to me. It reveals that God expects something. He really does. He expects something from what we've been given. And he expects an increase. He doesn't just expect to, at the end of our life, say, oh good, I made it without going bankrupt. Or I was able to have a house and keep it. I was able to keep my job. I was able to, have my retirement last till I died. Like that would be in the Bible considered the wicked servant. Yeah. Wow, that's, and I'm talking about, interpreting this here. This is God's mentality of like, no, I actually expect an increase from what I've given you. And so we're hoping for a bunch of grandkids, increase. We want to see that increase. Even when it goes to ministry, it goes to finances. If these things are God's, and these things are here to glorify God, even my kids, here to glorify God, our marriage, our house, then we want to see it increase. We want to think that way, because sometimes when you just thinking that way opens up possibilities and ideas. But when you think protection, when you think I'm just keeping this for myself, I need to hoard, in a sense, I need to protect what's mine, then there's no thoughts of increase. There's only thoughts of maintain, right? And so God, he expects increase. And we want to think that way, right? We want to think that he's going to reward us. But the third servant, he was under some sort of spell. It was theological spell. It was relational. Maybe his heart was hurt. I don't know what it was, but he just had a really negative view of his master. Something that we need to think about towards God, right? Because if we're not careful, we can have that same view, right? So here's some barriers that we need to get over when thinking about, in order to move into that place where we think about increase, we think about risk, we think about taking what we have and producing more with it, okay? We have to battle or cut off or repent from this whole thing of being scared to mess up. Scared of making wrong decisions. This is something that keeps us fearful and not thinking about increase or not risking what we have to get more. Because the two first servants, they had to risk it. They had to risk to get more. They didn't play it safe. Another one. Believing the worst is somehow safe. I don't know if that you can identify with that, but believing the worst is somehow safe.
I see some heads shaking. I'm like, no, yep, that's me. Or no.
Right? How does that get in here and in here? But somehow it's there. It's definitely a temptation. The way of thinking, right? Believing the worst is somehow safe. It's going to keep you safe. It's going to protect you. Negative thinking will protect you somehow. We have to shake that thing off. How about this one? Beating myself up will get me to produce more.
There's a lot of that that goes on. On occasion.
Right?
Yeah.
Wow. Like beating myself up. Get me, produce more, produce more. If I lose my sense of fear, I will slip into danger. If I lose that's basically saying fear protects me.
Yeah.
Fear is by nature demonic. So you're basically, we are in that belief system, we're basically saying, oh, demons, you're my friends. I know you'll protect me. Losing my sense of fear will cause me to slip into danger. How about this one? If I really believed that God is proud of me, it wouldn't be true. And I'd be living under a false reality. If I really believed God's proud of me, I'm scared that if it's not true, I'm just fooling myself and living in a false reality. And that would be dangerous, right? Because confidence, for some of us, is too close to pride.
Mm-hmm.
Confidence is scary because it sometimes looks like pride. Right? Somewhere along the line, Moses, he switched from confidence to insecurity because remember, before he fled Egypt, you could tell by his actions, he felt like he could do something for his people. He felt like he could rescue them. He felt like he could change the world. And so after all that happened, he fled Egypt, something happened where he probably said to himself, gosh, nothing I tried worked. Maybe his heart was broken for his people and he's always somewhere else. Once in a while, shepherding sheep, thinking about his people, like being suffering. And he's like, well, I failed. I blew it. I tried everything, but it didn't work. And so when God asked him, I want you to go back, he's like, who am I? Everything I did turned out terrible. Right? And that's what sometimes failure can do to us. But failure is just learning. In the kingdom, there's really no failure. There's only learning. So maybe his heart was broken. Maybe he just, somewhere along the line he switched. He no longer had the confidence that he had. But increase comes when God's people are confident. And we're confident not necessarily in who I am, I'm so great. That would be pride. But I'm confident in whose I am. And I'm confident in who He is. And He lives inside of me. Christ in me. Amazing. We are His. And He is everything. And that's where our confidence comes from. And so we're going to get into some discussion questions. And I have them, we're going to have them on the screen for the people at home. We're home, but in your own home. And I'm going to go through them real quickly. But we're going to have them on the screen for you guys. Number one, what are you responsible for? And probably the most valuable thing is your time. I would say that you're responsible. You've been given time, and you're responsible for that time, right? Just like me with that video game. I'm responsible for that time I wasted. And that alert that comes on your phone, like, your screen time just went up 33%. I'm like, oh no, it's the game. What are you responsible for? You're responsible for your possessions, the wealth, the physical wealth that you have. Remember, Jesus said, if you're responsible with worldly wealth, you'll be given responsibility over true riches. So there's something obviously much more valuable than worldly wealth, but we're still responsible for that. We're responsible for our relationships. That's a big one. That's true riches right there.
Yeah.
We're responsible for our relationship with God. We're responsible for our city, our neighbors, our state. You know, we're responsible for these things, right? So you guys can answer that. What does increase look like in those areas? So I really want to get everyone to just start thinking, okay, these are my responsibilities. What would it mean? What would it look like for increase in those areas? And you guys can discuss that. What fears cause you to avoid risk in those areas is a good one. And then we have some prayer points up there that we can pray for our minds to be renewed, to expect increase in every area. Ask for strategy for increase. It's another prayer point. And for the church in America to shine like King Solomon, who, because of his stewardship, he saw increase and it really attracted the nations, right? That's a form of evangelism. And so we're going to put those questions up there for everyone to begin to discuss. So I'm going to hand just the online video over to our discussion questions and have you guys be able to discuss in your own homes and just share. Make sure you call out. There's sometimes there's a quiet one in the corner. Make sure you get from them what they have in their mind, because a lot of times they have some good nuggets that they wouldn't have shared, and we want to hear them. So anyway, bless you guys. Love you. We're going to put